Good morning and welcome to the Ask Weldon Show, episode 217. Today we're going to talk about coming back from being down in lane or in life. An excellent question coming in from Chambers for the show today. This is the Ask Weldon Show, and it's a show where you ask me questions, usually related to life and usually related to sport and exercise psychology or esports psychology, because I happen to have a master's degree in sport and exercise psychology. But you can also ask questions about life, love, the pursuit of happiness, or anything in between, including League of Legends strategy, since I'm a fan. And you can ask those questions by going to anchor.fm/Weldon Green and calling them in on your phone. I put the audio questions on the show, and we tackle them in YouTube video format, I guess. That's the answer to that. You can also check out the show on Twitch, twitch.tv/MindGamesWeldon, where you can ask questions in the chat live before and after this recorded show, and then I will answer and converse with you in dialogue, and so we can get a little bit more in depth there. If you have a more complex question that you're not really sure how to ask, that would be a good place to start, and then you can call it in once you've refined it, for the benefit, of course, of you people on YouTube. And that's it. No other announcements, no other calls to action. I think we can jump right into the show. All right, so the first question today is from Bogdan. Can I improve faster by smurfing? Let's hear it.
Hi, Weldon. I was wondering if smurfing on a smaller account and playing a lot on it, constantly winning, but when you make a mistake, you know it's a big mistake because you definitely shouldn't make it, especially in a lower elo, so you know how to focus on it compared to playing your solo queue games as normal and focusing on the mistakes you do there. Not really taking in consideration about reviewing your games after only by playing them. Thank you.
All right, so first of all, Bogdan, thanks for the question. And the simple answer is yes, you can use smurfing as a tool to improve. Specifically, the way that it works is it's really hard to do drills in League of Legends. It's really hard to pick a specific thing that you suck at and drill it because there's no tool that would enable you to do that. However, so what happens is you enter into a solo queue game at your level, and the very first thing that breaks prevents you, so like you get behind, and that prevents you from practicing things later in the game at the appropriate level or in the appropriate way. So when you're smurfing, you can kind of get through easier parts of the game or parts that would be harder at your current level and get to a different part that you want to practice, and you can improve that skill. And that's important because you don't really want to learn the game by pressing play and working from the beginning forwards. There are things that you need to learn about skirmishing and team fighting that will benefit you in laning, but if you can never survive lane to get to those things with the capability of practicing them, then smurfing can help with that. And so I think if you have a specific exact focus and it can help highlight those mistakes and it can help you train those skills, that smurfing is a great way to highlight those parts of the game. Of course, you have to combine that with playing at your regular level, so that you don't get any sort of false confidence or misunderstanding of what your laning capabilities are. On the other hand, I don't like how the question ended, Bogdan, where you said essentially, what about smurfing, where I get this focus and I understand the mistake that I made and I get all this clarity, compared with games at my normal rank where I don't VOD review and I don't think about the mistakes. Well, of course, thinking about mistakes and noticing them and concentrating them is better than not doing it. So you should be comparing this to regular ranked games at your normal level where you do VOD review and you do think about your mistakes and you do try to pick apart the game and improve, because you're comparing apples to oranges here. It's irrelevant. Yes, smurfing or not smurfing, either way, studying your games is going to make you improve more than not studying them. And if you smurf and don't care, then I don't think it's going to be that much more helpful for learning than if you play ranked at your natural level and don't care either. That's just my impression. I think it'll probably make you worse honestly. I think it'll give you like, it's just easier to play at that level because it feels better. So it's motivationally like easier to push play, cue in, enjoy the game, etc. But that doesn't mean that it's making you more successful. Okay, that was question number 1. Let's jump into question number 2, which is the kind of a titular question of the show. Coming back from a loss.
Hey Weldon, it's Chambers Oriel Tigers here, and I was wondering that in like a lot of the games I play and a lot of assignments and stuff that I do in the real life, I found out that early on at the beginning of the assignment, or maybe like in lane and league, like I'll take an early trade and lose, but I'm never able to recover. Or like an assignment, if I get behind or like a mess up, it's hard for me to get past that. And so like I was wondering, what are ways to take like an early or first like negative loss on something and turn it into like a net positive, like be able to kind of flip it on its head, or I guess you could also say like come back from being down, because it's really something difficult that I struggle with. Thanks, man.
All right, thanks for this question. It sounds really fun, and I'm super curious about how I'm going to answer it. So, I think there's probably a couple components to this. I think one of them has to be being able to maintain focus on the present and not let your mind drift back to the mistake. That has to be one component of it, and this is probably the trained component, right? So if we're thinking about mental focus or mindfulness, or being in the mindset of mastery, where you're constantly thinking about getting better than you were yesterday, or being in flow state, which is like a present state focus, all of these, all the things I just mentioned, the main benefit is that you're focusing on the now and not the 5 seconds ago, 10 seconds ago. So for a game, that would be, okay, how do I win the game now in its current state? What am I trying to achieve? Irrelevant of how I got here. It doesn't matter if it was my mistake or a jungler mistake, or if it just like the game booted up this way and I happened to be, a level down and half an item down and being pushed in under tower. So like you're just focused on the challenge, right? You're focused on the challenge. And it should be the same for homework. The ability to keep your mind now and not on your early loss where you lost the saving document that you had on your computer, or whatever it was, like you got a low score and now you have to redo it. I don't really know how it is that you take a loss early in on homework. I'm confused about that. But I'm assuming that it's the same kind of mental situation as going down in lane or going down in life early, right? So, I mean, obviously you can't respawn in life, so I don't mean going down, but I mean taking a hit. Let's put it that way. So there's that component of the skill that you have to acquire, and that gets harder the bigger the challenge it is. For me, I consider myself very good at this skill, but for example, when we lost Worlds in San Francisco, the next day I was sitting there looking out of the hotel room window and practicing like the refocusing on the present and not dwelling on the past, and it was the hardest. I think probably the hardest that has ever been. It was very challenging to not to control my emotions, to control my mind and let my emotions settle. It was in a huge turmoil. And so I understand the massive challenge that you can face in regards to how stressful the act is, depending on, what it is that happened to you. Then there has to be another component, and this would be the cognitive behavioral therapy side, which is you condition your brain a little bit in how it reacts to adversity in this way. So the first thing that happens is you have thoughts that just pop into your head when stuff like this happens, okay? And you can't really control these, but you can condition them, okay? So by arguing with them over time and forcing a different thought pattern on yourself, you can both lessen the frequency of these thoughts, the negative ones, and you can increase the frequency of positive thoughts that are related to these kind of trauma or mistakes. And you can prepare yourself for when you do actually then accidentally have a negative thought anyway, or I don't want to call them negative and positive because they're not correlated to negative and positive sounding. It's more like there's productive and non-productive. There's things that are going to make you better, and there's things that only are just a useless waste of time to think. And some of those actually sound positive, like, you're going to be okay, you got this, just relax, be happy. I mean, some of those thoughts are not really that conducive to improving. Relaxation is not a very good performance, mindset to have. So in cognitive behavioral therapy, or in what you're going to be doing here, essentially you have these thoughts, right? And then you have thought patterns that arise from them. And your thought patterns probably are not very healthy. Probably you have thoughts that arise out of the whatever bubbling up of your brain. And then you have a line of argumentation or a line of thought that derives from those that is not the best. And you should literally write down the things that you say to yourself. So I want you to try to remember the initial thought. Try to get all the way back to the root and be like, what's the first thing that you tell yourself? And I don't mean emotion. I don't mean, oh, I'm frustrated or I'm mad. I mean literally the self-talk. Write down the thing that you tell yourself, the sentence that you say to yourself in your mind on paper. And then write down the things that you then derive from that. Like, what is the chain of stuff that comes from that thought that you kind of say? And then I want you to, in the words of the guy from that new Karate Kid reboot, which is so cool, flip the script, where you essentially instead come up with a productive thought pattern that you can derive from those thoughts. So you can say, okay, so here's an example, and we'll do this in the Twitch chat after the show. So if you want to come over to Twitch, check out the VOD, or make sure that you're there consistently because we do these fun activities. Let's say you have a thought like, oh, I screwed up again. I always mess this up. Then your thought pattern, your negative or your unproductive thought pattern might be, I'm such a loser. I never seem to learn. How come other people can do this just naturally and I have to put so much effort in? When is this ever going to get better? I don't feel like it's improving at all. Something like that. So what you would do, you go back to the original, right? So the thought that's going to come up no matter what is, oh, I screwed up again. I can't seem to get this. I can never learn this. And then the productive thought pattern would be like focused effort and training takes time. Everybody has different strengths and weaknesses. I just have to keep grinding until I get it. I know what's wrong and I'm able to identify it. And this challenge, meeting somebody who's better at it than me, is a teachable moment that I can learn from. It's so great that it's happening now because I don't have to go looking for it. I can learn in this moment. And imagine if I got to tomorrow and I never encountered anybody good enough or any assignment good enough to push me to fail, then I wouldn't have learned anything today. So let me buckle down and remember the lessons I got from today's version of whatever this is, so that I don't make the same mistake again, even though I know that I'm going to, and it's okay. So you can have a more productive thought pattern. And then these, as you force yourself to use these kind of arguments, they become habits. They become habitual ways of you to think about challenges. And then what happens is actually the unproductive thoughts start to decrease naturally without doing anything about it. I mean, you're doing something about it, right? But you're not trying to manipulate your thoughts. You're just manipulating your reactions to your thoughts. Of course, you're going to have bad days, and they're going to come back. So you need to have the robust framework of how to deal with them. When they come, you can't just work on trying to sweep them out and make sure they don't happen. That's a bad approach to take. I mean, a bad long-term approach to take. It's a good thing to happen, right? Okay, that's my answer. I think if you can't notice your self-talk, get mindful, get reflective, get a journal and start diarying it, or get a diary and start journaling it. Maybe that's a better way to turn that sentence. And thanks for the question. Before I jump into the last question, I want to talk about the MAC program. This is the training program which will give you the skills needed to achieve what I just talked about. Okay, mindfulness. Mindfulness down here. Now I've covered up so you can't see it, but mindfulness is like the ability to track your thoughts and see what you're thinking. So that will directly correlate with your ability to observe your thoughts and write them down. Acceptance has to do with moving past these things, and commitment lets you essentially frame them in a way that gives you motivation and discipline for growth. So this is kind of the core precepts of the training program that I put together. This is an online video training program. It's 47 videos, 7 modules with 7 sessions each. So except for I think the 6th or 5th module has like 5 sessions. But anyway, yeah, so you've completed over, 2 months, and it's a session per day. Each day has a training component as well as a lecture. And it's $25 if you use the code AskWeldon to get your discount and to say that you come from YouTube. Check it out. It supports everything that I do on this brand and on this channel. And I'm currently using the funds from this to turn it into an app, which you will all get access to, as everybody who purchases the program gets lifetime access to every future iteration of it currently. That's going to change when the app comes out, because obviously apps require maintenance and sustaining and program changes and stuff like that. So it'll probably go to a subscription model. But for now, it's a one price forever setup. All right, let's go on to the third question from Fabrice.
Hello, Weldon.
Hello.
My question is there a sensitivity that is too high for your brain? Like, I always was a low sensitivity guy in Counter-Strike and other FPS. And in Rocket League, you can adjust your dead zone of your controller. So the lower you go, the more reactive your stick is in-game. And it leads to lower input lag, and I feel input lag a lot. So I use the lowest I can get. But sometimes it feels like my car is like in the air. It's reacting too much, or it's turning too much. So sometimes I think about upping the dead zone, but then I would get more input lag, and I don't want that. So my question is there a too high of sensitivity for your brain to adjust or to learn it, or for your fingers? So I don't know. Thank you.
All right. So the real question is, just I'll frame it for those of you who are trying to understand what's going on here. Is there a setting of sensitivity that's too quick or too sensitive for the neurons, for the pressure neurons in our fingers to communicate with the brain, and for our motor system related to our shoulder, arm, wrist, finger structure to control with precision? That's the question. Where's the limit for precise control with pressure sensitivity coming from the fingers and the hand that would allow for exact, precise control of that? And obviously, I mean, maybe this isn't obvious, but I have no idea the answer to that question. But I will tell you that the hands, the hands here and the bottom of the feet have more sensation neurons and pressure neurons and other neurons related to touch than pretty much all the rest of the body combined, except for the genitals. Obviously, you throw the genitals in with those. You throw those three, and it's like everything else together. So this is a highly tuned instrument here, and on top of that, the arm shoulder structure, if you're using it correctly, is very precise. All you have to do is look at like art that involves like very precise small movements, all the way to neurosurgery, where you're essentially like, doing surgery with your hands in somebody's brain, to understand that with training we can have very precise movements with our hands using the instrument that we have here for sensation of pressure and touch. How that, like, where is the limit of that? I don't think that I can answer that very well. I'm sure that it has been thought about. I'm sure that it's been studied as well, probably with some sort of instrument or way of measuring it that is not that translatable to esport. So we'd have to replicate the study in esport to kind of find out what the answer is. And it's a very interesting question, and I hope that it's picked up soon enough. But I would say that I would say maybe to just assume that you can control it, and assume that you can get that refined, and assume that the mistakes that you're making in terms of over rotation, etc., are related to the typical progression of your brain learning how to control the muscles and get that sensitive, and maybe even could be related to losing focus for a moment. Like, you lose focus for a moment when you're doing neurosurgery, the results are much more drastic than if you lose focus while you're digging a hole with an excavator, right? So you can miss a little bit with an excavator, and like you're just picking up a little bit of extra dirt, and it's not that big a deal. You miss with something with a very sensitive instrument in a very specific sensitive moment, and it's disaster, right? So I would say, like, for now, what you should do is assume that it's possible and then focus on your precision. Every time you make a mistake like that, realize that you were distracted, focus on being precise, or maybe you were choking. Maybe you were over-focusing and over-controlling. That's also a possibility. So focus on the whole system of movement. And I would also start doing Japanese calligraphy, to be honest, so that you can understand the muscular structure that you need to control for that finesse. I would start doing Japanese calligraphy, hopefully with an instructor who can correct your form, but it involves movement of your elbow, controlling, essentially, you're supposed to hold the brush and draw with your elbow, not so much your wrist. Obviously, there's wrist movement related to it, but it's not the actual drawing movement, right? It's an arm movement. And so that is a more precise way of controlling these things, but it's learned. You can't just do it right away. Like, probably what you're doing right now is mostly wrist control. And if you can start with Japanese calligraphy and then start to transfer that kind of into the game a little bit, I think that you'll find that you have more growth potential and less falling back into weird mistakes that you shouldn't be making, because your control of the mouse will be more robust as in like your muscular control. It would just be a larger system of refined control, and so it'll be more accurate in the long term. That's my opinion, just from observing the way that pros move their mice and seeing that a majority of them are using more and more complex systems, and that seems to be more robust for getting a higher level at the game. Although, of course, there are plenty of pros who just only control their mouse with wrist movement, so it's not a limiting factor. But I think that if we're looking for consistency over time and you want to know the right answer, it's going to involve the shoulder. All right, yeah, that's my answer, and best of luck to you, and I hope someday we know the real answer to your question, because it sounds like a very fascinating one. All right, guys, that's the show for you today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure to check out the Mac program. Use the code AskWeldon, and subscribe to this YouTube channel if you want to get more videos like this. Share it with a friend if it's not going to cost you any social capital, because they are going to enjoy it. If they're not going to enjoy it, then I don't want to cause a rift in your relationship with them. And stop by the Twitch stream. Get your questions answered and have a conversation with me. 6:30 p.m. LA time every single